bridge between heaven and earth is severed, and only the Messiah can restore it. That was what Vicious had told him in the weeks before Jethro's birth. It had been 6 months since he abandoned Mary and Joseph. John knew he couldn't have saved them, but also had no delusions about his role in their deaths. He had made them feel safe when they weren't, and had pretended to care when he didn't. They were just 2 kids that were always destined to die. John lived, more or less permanently, in a sleazy motel and looked over his shoulder every time he dared to walk through the street. But at least the Messiah was alive. John had stashed Jethro away at an orphanage down the road from the motel under the careful watch of a nurse turned nun. To his knowledge, the sworn brethren had been eradicated by Vicious. The cheap motel room reeked of disinfectant. There was only a small space between bedroom and kitchen, and the peeling paint on the plaster wall had a ruddy tint like dried blood. John drifted off into a deep slumber, curled up on the sagging spring mattress with a pillow tucked between his arms and head. He awoke to the smell of smoke. He looked around to see where it was coming from and followed the smell to the window. A fire, and then it hit him. The orphanage. John charged towards the door and made his way outside. The street had become a river of people, all rushing away from the fire in the same direction. John manoeuvred his way around them with some difficulty. To his eyes, every distressed pedestrian was a Christ killer in disguise, but he did not flinch or cower. He pressed on towards the orphanage where a handful of onlookers had gathered. John saw that there were 24 firefighters combating the flames, and to his horror, the orphanage had been engulfed in a burning inferno. The fumes stung John's eyes and suffocated his throat. He slumped to the ground, wheezing and gasping for air. Every breath was like trying to drink mud through a straw. John approached the firefighters and asked if they had found any survivors, but the youngest one gave him a look that was answer enough. He had failed. The orphans were dead, the nun was dead, and the Messiah was dead. In a run-down casino, John gambled with what remained of his life savings on a game of poker. He drank beer to mask the taste of failure. Later, he learned that the local children's hospital and church had also been firebombed. This had been a well-coordinated attack. It was naive to think that all of the Christ killers had died during Vicious's purge. John hadn't even moved away from the town where he found Mary, and that had made it far too easy for them to find Jethro. Daybreak rolled in, and despite a few bad beats, John walked away with a couple of $100 in profit. He made his way back to the motel and opened the door to find a smartly dressed man in a suit, his jacket hanging from the coat rack. John stopped in his tracks. Bleary-eyed from the late night at the casino, his hand still on the door handle, his head telling him to turn around and run the other way. But his legs won't cooperate, and then he blinks and sees the baby. John froze with disbelief. The man laid the child down in the centre of the bed, and John walked over to get a closer look. He opened up the bundle of blankets, peered down at the squirming child, and sighed happily. The Messiah recoiled from his touch and burst into tears. John lifted up the Messiah to soothe its cries, but to no avail. "Here, allow me," said the man, the tone of his voice soft and kind. John hesitated, but ultimately handed the Messiah over. The man's voice was alluring as he sang a beautiful lullaby that quietened the Messiah's cries. John took in the man's large build and asked, "Who are you?" "Gabriel," he answered. John smirked, thinking over what Gabriel's presence meant. "Since you're here, I'm guessing you still want me to protect the Messiah." "Yes," replied Gabriel. "I'm being watched, and there is no one else." Good, thought John. Any advice on what I should do? Clearly some of the brethren's Christ killers have escaped the purge. Survive, I guess. And there is only one Christ killer you need to worry about, said Gabriel. The hunter. He was the one who led the assault on the old Wick farm 6 months ago. "I thought Vicious said he would take care of the hunter," questioned John. Gabriel's brow furrowed. "Vicious is dead." John felt his stomach turn. "Why Vicious left the hunter for last is beyond me," Gabriel continued. "He should have taken him out first with no warning. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you have been framed for these recent firebombing attacks, and the police will search for you." "What? Why?" John asked, stunned. "This is the hunter's doing. You have eluded him for so long that he considers you a threat. He collected your DNA from the Old Wick farm and will use the police to find out who you are. Even if you turn yourself in and prove your innocence, The hunter will just kill you the first chance he gets, said Gabriel. Your old life is over. No shit, replied John. What's the plan now? I won't lie, things have changed now that Vicious is dead, but he was able to destroy the Brethren's astronomy tower, which will buy us some time. Unfortunately, there was something he failed to destroy. The pedicide virus. The sworn Brethren's last resort, said Gabriel. It is a chemical weapon that only targets children in their infancy. Sadly, it is an unstable substance that will spread across the continent and maybe even the hemisphere. Since hearing of its existence, I spent decades secretly dedicating all of my resources until I found a vaccine. However, distribution of this vaccine would take too long, and some children would be unable to receive it in time, which is why I have devised a plan to stop the virus from being released in the first place. A virus that only kills babies, said John. Are you serious? I'm afraid so, replied Gabriel. John folded his arms and stared at the Messiah. And you have a vaccine that absolutely works? Yes, said Gabriel. Vicious and I tested it. John weighed his words. Well, isn't it obvious what we should do? If the hunter believes that no children in their infancy can survive the virus, then why should we make him think otherwise? Gabriel shifted uneasily. Where are you going with this? I'm saying we let the hunter release the virus and only give the vaccine to the Messiah. Gabriel said nothing. This will convince the hunter that he has killed the Messiah, said John. No, Gabriel told him as though it were final. Are you really willing to risk the Messiah's safety for a few thousand children we don't even know? Said John, who don't even matter. It could be so much more than a few thousand, said Gabriel with a look of torment. I don't agree with this plan. We should concentrate our efforts on figuring out where we are going to hide you and the Messiah. John knew exactly where. We go to the second stage of Vicious' original plan and take the Messiah to Oldwick Forest, he said, watching Gabriel's eyes narrow with doubt. We were planning to head there eventually. It's a place that I'm very familiar with and a place that we can easily avoid the outside world. That'll give me years to get Jethro ready before the hunter sees through our little deception. Get ready? Questioned Gabriel. How will you prepare the Messiah for being hunted every day of his life by someone like the hunter? You don't need the details, said John, smiling. John saw Gabriel look at him, confused. Then he realized John's intentions. You do that to a child? He said. I do it to the Messiah, he replied. John gave Gabriel a twisted smile. Then I'll get Jethro to bring about a rapture, and my place in heaven will be guaranteed. John pulled up his sleeves and showed his contract with Michael written on his flesh. So that's why you're doing all this, said Gabriel. John nodded. If we do what you say and let the hunter release the pedicide virus, then he'll believe that the Messiah is dead beyond all doubt and patiently wait for the star to reappear, said John. We'd be killing thousands of infants just to buy a little time for a deception that the hunter might not even fall for, repeated Gabriel as though John had not heard him the first time. We can give out the vaccine secretly, save as many children as we can. No, snapped John. He despised stating the obvious. If even one child survives, then it compromises the Messiah's safety. The hunter will be busy rebuilding the Brethren and their astronomy tower. His attention will be completely diverted so long as he truly believes there is no possibility the Messiah could have survived. If those in heaven found out, Gabriel warned. Hell is winning the war, replied John, and they're going to win unless we stop them with a rapture. John stepped forward and leaned into Gabriel's personal space without breaking eye contact. You would be a hero if we succeed. He crouched down so that they were level. Besides, neither of us are getting into heaven anytime soon. But with this, John gestured to his contract with Michael. So long as we pull this off, we can both get in. Understand? Gabriel only had eyes for the floor. John enjoyed Gabriel's misery. You know what the problem with heaven is? Gabriel did not answer. There is absolutely nothing we wouldn't do to get in. Or in your case, get back in. John squeezed Gabriel's shoulder. Lighten up. While the bridge is still severed, we can get away with anything and nobody will notice. So we'll use the Messiah and get everything we've ever wanted. When John was given his contract with heaven, he realized that if someone like him was allowed inside, then those in heaven really don't care what you've done. The only thing that matters is what you can do for them. John watched as Gabriel sat in silence. He was clearly having a crisis of conscience, but it didn't matter. He belonged to John now.